Man, I love Resident Evil. I would even go so far as to say that it never has produced anything not good since the dawn of the very first Resident Evil back in 1990 something. Okay, I think that's enough for the intro bit. So yeah, Resident Evil has produced tons of terrible, terrible, awful things. I'm looking at you, brand new live action movie. And by brand new, I mean, wow, it's been like a couple years now, hasn't it? And of course, there's some of the more well known and more talked about, not so awesome things like Resident Evil 6. A whole mainline series game that's looked at as being pretty not swell. And I would go so far to say as Resident Evil Zero should also fall in that category. I think that game sucks. How dare you make Resident Evil 1 look bad, you terrible prequel. But this video is not about my hatred for Resident Evil Zero. No, tonight I would like to, or today, depending on when you're watching, I would like to talk about 3 awful Resident Evil games that don't really get talked about. Now, of course, all the opinions expressed here are my own, so there may be some people who think that the games I'm about to talk about are actually kind of good. In fact, I know that there are people like that out there because I've read the Steam reviews for these games, so I know there are some sick and twisted individuals out there with some really messed up ideas about what fun is. But don't you worry your little head. This is a safe space free from all the tyrannical, nasty opinions of people. People that aren't me, of course. So sit back, relax, and prepare to listen to me ramble on about some of the most disappointing parts of my favorite game series. Now, it wouldn't be a Resident Evil game without ResidentEvil.net, would it? So there's a lot of text on the screen. I can send my data, enjoy my experience, upload, blah, 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 blah. I would love to know how many people actually use the Resident Evil net stuff. Probably, maybe 10. Anyways, getting past all that. Welcome to Umbrella Corps. Yay. They did a really good job of setting the tone with this menu screen. Desolate, bland, concrete. Man, I love it. Just listen to the little menu clicky click noises when you go up and down. Not gonna lie, this sounds really satisfying. One thing that really ticked me off though was the fact that the options menu is for some reason separated from every other tab. I mean, look at the bottom. It's so tiny. And who presses O for options? I get that it's alphabetically, O options, but why is it there? Why is it just like not under language? Why is language not under options? It doesn't, it doesn't make sense. Okay, enough options talk. Let me talk about the actual game. So, as you probably already know, this is not a mainline entry into the Resident Evil series. It's actually an offshoot that came out in 2016, believe it or not. Yeah, I totally thought this game was like late 2000s, like 2008, 2009. No, it came out, relatively recently, if you want to call 2016 recent. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't know much about the lore implications of this game, nor do I really care to know. The closest thing the game has to a story mode is called the Experiment. That's a pretty accurate name for what it ended up being. You know it's bad when your story mode is beneath the tutorial tab on the main menu. And yeah, this experiment mode is pretty much all you can do with this game now because it's dead. It's completely dead. You could tell the devs really wanted this to be a multiplayer experience because when you go to the online mode, there's a ton of different tabs to choose from. There's multiple playlists, and I did try to queue for some. But then I checked Steam charts and saw that there were a whopping 4 people online, meaning I really needed the 3 other people to try and queue the same mode as me. Surprise, surprise. They did not. But you could still play with friends if you have friends that want to play this game with you. I don't. I totally have friends, trust me. Totally. They just don't want to play Umbrella Corps with me for some reason. But hey, look at all the cool customization options you can do on your nameless Umbrella Soldier dude. They're actually relatively cool. These decals have some kind of, callbacks to some old Resident Evil stuff. Most of them seem like random stuff to me, but you know, occasional references, that's kind of cool. There's also tons of leaderboards, which I assume are hacked, given the top guys got like all nines. But hey, I mean, if this game actually ended up being a success, this would have been a really cool idea. So props to them for thinking of that. So that means all I can do right now is play the experiment. Because you know I am not about to play the tutorial for this game, because, yeah, that sounds boring. So with this being the official first time I've played Umbrella Corps, all I had to choose from were the first missions that I had to play in order. Now I could be wrong about this, but they all seem to be on the same Umbrella Lab sort of map. I know this is not the only map in the game because I watched the trailer. However, this is the only map I played on, so this is my definitive experiences, the lab map. Now, as you can see, the game takes place in this very oddly zoomed in third-person mode. The character also has this interesting little shield thingy on his other hand that it looks like a riot shield, but it's not that big, so I don't really know what purpose it serves other than making it take up half of the screen. I mean, from a practical standpoint, it makes sense. I mean, it would block a zombie bite, but come on, this is Resident Evil. I mean, who cares about getting bit by a zombie? I guess that happens a million times. Just pick up an herb and you're good to go. So this mission in particular was called Way of the Shotgun. However, it took me most of the mission to finally find the shotgun and pick it up. And I didn't even need the shotgun because pretty much all the missions in the game require you kill zombies, pick up the quote DNA sample, which is just a little red icon that drops when you kill an enemy. And then once you do that enough times, you beat the mission. And that's the game. Or at least that's the extent of the game now that multiplayer is dead. But let's be real, this game was definitely dead on arrival. It peaked at like 1,000 players. On the bright side, I found out that you can prone on accident, and the crawling speed is basically the same as the walking speed. So you can just crawl around the whole map shooting your gun, and it's a great time. Also, you can grab zombies and use them as human shields, which is honestly really cool, albeit kind of not useful at all, at least from the little bit that I played. Just a really cool thing to do. Makes you feel like you're, you know, some kind of super cool agent, which is what you're supposed to be. But no, you're actually just a loser playing a old Resident Evil game that only 3 other people in the world are playing right now at 12 a.m. on a Sunday night. Yeah, couldn't immerse me enough to forget that. Aw, yeah, time for my favorite Resident Evil game from the release year 2022, Reverse. What an awesome name. So this strictly multiplayer game came out about a year after Resident Evil Village did, and it actually came bundled with Village when you bought the game. So if you bought Village on release date, this thing was marinating in your game library for a long time. Why it got delayed, I don't know. The game's still not good, so the delay clearly didn't help that much. But enough ragging on the game, let's talk about what it actually has to offer. It's essentially a free-for-all arena shooter where you get to play as iconic Resident Evil characters, such as some of my favorites of all time: Umber Eyes, Canine, Lobo, Night Howl, and Tundra. I know this is Chris's team in Village, but come on, I don't think he says a single one of their names more than once. Some of those names don't sound familiar at all. This was just a lazy excuse to throw more bodies into the game. But anyways, once you choose the character you want to play as, you'll queue up into a standard match, unless you have friends that want to play a private match, which I know you don't. Definitely not projecting at all. And the game will then do its awesome skill-based matchmaking search for a grand total of probably 30 seconds. And then the game will open up the search to players of all skill levels. And thank goodness this game has crossplay, because I checked Steam charts while I was searching, and it said a roughly 7 people were playing, so to all those people on Xbox and PlayStation that helped me get this footage, shout out to you. Oh yeah, and this game also has a battle pass. It's been the same exact battle pass ever since it launched, so yeah, we never went into Season 2, but I think that's a good thing. The only reason I have any substantial amount of time playing this game is because I wanted to get all the achievements, and the one to reach level 10 in the battle pass caused me to grind it for roughly 4 hours. Thanks a lot. When you finally actually load into a game after searching for 10 minutes, you will find yourself in a ugly rendition of one of 3 maps. The Village from Resident Evil Village, the House from Resident Evil 7, should be subtitled The House, and The main part of the police station from Resident Evil 2, which if that had a subtitle, we all know it would be Resident Evil 2 Police Station. The reason I call it ugly is because there's this weird comic book filter over literally the entire screen. Resident Evil is not a comic. Why do they put this weird hexagon dot? I don't even know if you call it a comic filter. It's just ugly. Maybe there's a setting to turn it off. I don't care. It shouldn't be on in the first place. Maybe it's there for some kind of performance issues. Whatever. You gotta deal with it if you're playing the game. And the game is actually kind of fun at first. I mean, if you look at Leon, he's got special abilities such as kick and pull out 2 pistols and shoot them. And being a seasoned reverse veteran, I know the real meta to actually winning the game is picking up these little purple vials that lie around the map that when you die, the more vials you have, the better monster you turn into when you die. So if you have multiple vials, instead of turning into a suicidal mud monster from Resident Evil 7, you can turn into like Nemesis with an RPG. Now, I wouldn't say this game is exactly balanced. In the first game I played, I was going against Ada, which I absolutely hate because for some reason her crossbow like stuns you and it only takes like 2 headshots for you to die from. You know, that's my bad. I should have picked Ada too. There's also something mildly disturbing about watching Leon shotgun Claire to death as she tries to hang on for dear life and then she mutates into some creature. But yeah, the game at its surface seems pretty fun, but the more you play it, the more you realize it's not fun. And that largely, at least for me, falls on the terrible hit detection and the stun locking that so many different things can force upon you. Yeah, you may think you dodged that attack, but the game disagrees. You got hit from a mile away. But hey, can I blame them for having a poorly constructed online multiplayer game? Yes, I can, because they choose to do this over and over again. I'm sure they put some kind of like secondary team on the development of this game, but I imagine there were so many better uses of resources than pumping out this piece of garbage that probably roughly 100 people in the entire world play a day, if that. No hate to those people at all, but this is the type of game that requires a strong player base for it even to be playable at all. There's no option for AI matches against bots. You really need people online to play this game, unless you have friends. And that's a problem that Umbrella Corps kind of addressed with the experiment, even though it was a way of addressing it kind of terribly because the mode sucks. But at least Umbrella Corps will be alive and kicking 10 years from now with all those hardcore experiment gamers. This game, it came out less than 2 whole years ago, and yeah, it's all but dead. And it will be completely dead sooner or later. All there is left to do is stare at your own failure of being unable to win in the black void that they keep these characters when they're no longer being forced to kill each other on the battlefield. Capcom sure does love a good RE word. Resident Evil Resistance came out in 2020 alongside the Resident Evil 3 remake. Capcom sure does love bundling dead games along with their main series releases. Fortunately though, this game is doing a little bit better than the previous 2 that I've talked about, granted not by much. And that's kind of disappointing because unlike the other 2 games, I actually think this one is pretty fun. It's an asymmetrical game, and if you know anything about asymmetrical games, they fail. And they fail hard. This is when there's essentially one bad guy, maybe more, and then a group of the survivor characters, meaning it's multiple people against either one person or a smaller amount of people. The only asymmetrical game that I can think of being super successful is Dead by Daylight. Other games like Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, they all tend to have very short life cycles for whatever reason. And this game was by no means no exception to that. But it took a super interesting approach, whereas you have the survivor characters versus the mastermind. And the mastermind is essentially watching all 4 survivor characters through cameras throughout set levels that the survivors are trying to escape from. The mastermind essentially has a card deck that they get to choose from to spawn zombies, traps, and then of course their like main super ability that they get every once in a while, which could be anything from playing as Mr. X to this big old plant thingy that I don't even remember what it does. Meanwhile, the survivors are having to kill all these things to add more time to their timer because they lose when time runs out. Essentially, they don't die when they die from an enemy, it just knocks time off of them. It's a super interesting idea. The main issue was there isn't really a player base to back up the idea. because like the previous two games, this is an online game, and in order for it to be a successful game, you need people that are actually playing it. As for the gameplay itself, it's actually fairly solid in my opinion. On the Survivor side, you have some iconic characters. Okay, that's like the third time I've made the iconic character joke. But yeah, you've got these random people. You've got Nerd, Goth, Firefighter, okay, Violent Guy, Nerd, Part 2, Scantily Clad Woman, and Jill. Oh, that's cool, they actually have a real character. And then on the other side, they have a few select characters from the Resident Evil games that are evil. Just look at Nikolai's picture here. He is up to something. Fortunately, I was able to actually hop in a real game. I thought I was only going to be able to show tutorial gameplay, but wow, yeah, I mean, just look at this. I'm playing with some real pros in this lobby here. The whole credit system and buying up more items as a survivor is super cool, and it leads to like a really fun experience where you're actually invested in working together as a team to, you know, try to win as efficiently as possible. Unfortunately, that kind of gets upended by the frequently not so great connection. It's pretty frequent that hits will be at least a half-second delayed, meaning you hit a zombie and it doesn't register till significantly later than it should. And this really falls on the fact that this game runs off host connections. There's no dedicated servers. So if little Jimmy's using his parents' hotspot and he's hosting your game, it's a wrap. My team wasn't even able to walk through this door for some reason. We spent almost the entire time trying to shoot this zombie, but it just would not die. However, if you are able to assemble a group of people with relatively solid internet connection, this game can be pretty fun, which is pretty surprising to me given the track record of games like this. Unfortunately, there's probably no saving this game from the fate that it has currently befell, with it being a bundled on game to a game that was pretty well received, but also by Resident Evil fans somewhat negatively received, that being Resident Evil 3 Remake. This game is kind of largely forgotten. You ask someone about it, they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that game existed. I probably played it for 30 minutes and then never touched it again. And that's kind of sad to me, because there's a lot of good stuff going on in this game, but unfortunately, it just was not meant to be. I'm sure the servers are going to shut down sooner or later, and it's just going to be a relic of Resident Evil history. Am I sad about that? Not really. I mean, it's who cares that much? Not me. But it is nice to think on what could have been a not disappointing Resident Evil game in another life.